All right, welcome to StereoPsych. I'm Stephen Downey, clinical psychologist from Australia. Um, Doing a one today. I'm going to be doing a usual Reddit breakdown. So rough plan will be I'll read it and then we'll do a breakdown from there. I have selected this one because it's one that I particularly wanted to talk about. I think it's something that isn't talked about enough. So without further ado, like if you like it, subscribe if you want to see more like this, and I'll duck into this. So, am I the asshole for not wanting another baby with my wife? I'm the father, 28 male, of a toddler, 3 male, and stepdaughter, 8-year-old female. My son was not planned. In fact, when my girlfriend, now wife, 32 female, got pregnant, I wanted her to have an abortion, but she refused. I struggled a lot during the first year of our son's life. I felt a lot of resentment and had a hard time bonding with him. It's so bad that I sought therapy, which helped me to work through my issues. Now, 3 years later, I feel much better and have a good relationship with my son and stepdaughter. However, my wife recently told me she wants another baby. She wants a huge family, and another child would complete our family. I've made it clear that I don't want another baby, but I still sometimes have doubts about my ability as a father and fear going back to the place I was in. But she won't let it go and keeps trying to convince me, saying I'll be better prepared this time. I'm a father for 2 children already, that I need to give it a chance. I feel like my reasons for not wanting another child are valid and based on my past experience. I don't want to risk my mental health, but my wife is adamant, and now I'm starting to wonder if I'm being too unsecured. I'm not ready for one more child. Some info: my wife works remotely at home, so the kids spend most of the time with her. I did most of the shares and took care of the kids when I'm available. It's fine with our family until now. I don't know one more kids can make any difference, but I feel frightened whenever I think about that. Okay. Um, okay, I really just, what is this? Not the asshole. Having another child is a 2 yes, 1 no kind of situation. Either you're both on board with the excitement or it's not a good idea. You'd have a very open conversation about your feelings, and the two of you can come to an agreement. No sex, don't risk it. Good luck, OP. Don't know about the no sex, don't risk it. You just wear a condom and you can have a reasonable degree of security in that. Make sure that you use it properly. As to the rest of that, yeah, it's not a bad comment. We rarely read comments, but this one is not bad. Where would I approach something like this? I would actually start at the point where he did not attach properly in having the child. So yeah, so struggled a lot during the first year of our son's life, felt a lot of resentment, had a hard time bonding with him. This is a far more common experience than people give it credit for. So generally speaking, we are very concerned about mothers being able to attach to their babies. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but put simply, babies just thrive better when they attach to their mothers. So that is something which is absolutely necessary, but we've spent very little time looking into fathers, and something which I find is a common experience, which I actually figured out for myself when I had our first child. And since I've talked to other people about it and found it's more common than I imagined, which is feeling like your child is barely yours or not yours for a period up to months after you have had said child. So that can obviously have a lot of issues regarding attachment, particularly where, which is often the case as well, blokes, at least in the Western world, don't have a lot of place in the raising of very little children. So first off, we're not culturally pushed towards that as like a desirable thing. The more common attitude seems to be that your children suddenly become interesting magically when they're around about, 2-ish, and they can start to play and talk and that kind of stuff. But I think a lot of blokes are expecting that to just happen essentially by magic, where in reality, that's not how this tends to work at all. Usually, if you haven't put in the work in those very early stages of having a baby, the attachment just doesn't exist properly when they're 2 or 3 to be having those, dad fun times and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, a lot of fathers feel completely insecure. It's funny, like you can put us in work sites, we can do horrible crap, we can push our bodies, we can work with tools. We can work out very complicated things, and yet you put this soft, squishy little thing that feels like it's very dangerous, and something which a lot of men have done, right, that a lot of women have not. And I feel like, again, this could get me slaughtered by the peanut gallery. Most men have killed something the size of a baby, be it a fish or some other thing. We sort of know that this is fragile in a way that a lot of females, a lot of women haven't. They don't have that experience of ending the life of something that's about the same size as a child, right? And these things kind of matter, because when you're looking at it and you're feeling insecure yourself because you don't feel particularly bonded with this child, but you know that this thing is freaking fragile because you've killed something about this big, and it's not that big of a drama. Like, it's easier than you might imagine. A lot of blokes are terrified of their children. And I don't say that lightly. I mean, genuinely terrified of their children. So, you end up with this interruption between essentially dads being attached to their children, which is quite usual, particularly the first child. Most of us kind of learn it and expect it, and by the second child, we're in a better spot. But I can understand somebody who, in this case, has had their first child and has experienced that on top of mental health. So a lot of men experience this, but they don't experience mental health concerns from it. They just aren't particularly connected with their child, and that's something they struggle with. This poor bloke's had mental health issues on top of that, by the sounds of it. And I mean, the situation isn't ideal from the start. I usually encourage people, use freaking contraception. If you don't want a child, do something about it, because otherwise you're going to have a child. And if you weren't sure whether or not you wanted a child, and you find out after the fact, no, I don't, like if this bloke starts off with, I wanted to have an abortion, right? It's, we have no idea at all about the state of their relationship when she gets pregnant or anything like that. There's an age difference here. It's not huge, but there is an age difference of, so she's 32, he's 28. Their child is 3 plus 9 months of pregnancy. He was somewhere around 23, 24 when they met, and she was sort of 28, 29 when they met. 23-year-old is still figuring out life to a large degree. I'm sure there's a bunch of 18-year-olds watching this going, yes, I'm an adult. I know exactly what I think. You're completely wrong. Come and talk to me when you're 30. I promise you, your 18-year-old self will look like a child to you, and you will wonder why the hell anybody let you decide anything about your life. So where would we go with something like this? Again, until this bloke resolves these initial issues around that. It sounds like maybe therapy helped, but got him to the point of like, okay, I'm functioning, but I'm not necessarily well. It's not necessarily resolved. And I do find that to be a habit of blokes in therapy. They come along and they get back to functional, and then that's it. I never see them again. And unfortunately, this is the point of actually working through something until it's properly resolved, is making sure that we don't wind up with situations like this, where when it comes to a second child, he's actually ambivalent. So when I say ambivalent, the reasons that he doesn't, it's not that he doesn't want a second child, it's that he doesn't want his depression back. And that's a very different thing. I would want to see that this bloke is able to consider the thought of having another child without the fear of mental health issues, right? Then I could have good confidence that he is making the decision with only considering, do I want another child or not? Because this is the sort of thing that sometimes later turns into the issues. I know I come back to values a lot, but, is he going to be happy in the future for not having had a child, for the fear of potential mental health? What impacts is that going to have on the relationship between these two people generally? It's said in here that she wants a huge family. Now we're starting to talk about, is she willing to sacrifice the huge family to stay with you? Or is your decision around not wanting another kid potentially a relationship-ending decision? And I'm not saying that he should not stick to his guns. I'm saying there are consequences here that I would want to look at and kind of go, well, hang on a second. If the main reason for not wanting a kid is the fear of depression, how about we work with that? How about we plan around that, and we'll work together before you have said kid? And then we will plan that when you have the kid, we are immediately there, but you're going to have the assistance of a psychologist, for instance, go, right, here is what I want you to do to attach to your child. Because some of the things are very freaking simple. You know, they do skin-to-skin contact with mums, for instance, really push it. They do not push it with fathers to the same degree. And yet, that's where some of the literal physical bonding hormones come from, is some of that skin-to-skin contact. And they don't talk about it. And blokes don't do that naturally, right? We are not like culturally raised to be like, you know, even if we want, by the way, some blokes, if you really get them in a vulnerable moment, they'll admit, I would love nothing more than to have that fragile little piece of like half me sitting bang right on my chest, just like, yep, you are the safest thing in the world. And yet they feel that it would be feminine or emasculating to do so because of how we're culturally raised. Therefore, they don't, but they also struggle to attach, right? And you can see how some of this stuff actually becomes a cultural like nightmare for blokes in a Western setting. To sort of go, how do we work with this? So a situation like this, I think, isn't as cut and dry as the first comment. Actually, I don't mind where the first comment is coming from, but a sort of like having another child is a 2 yes, 1 no kind of situation. That's a fantastic way to put it, and I want to remember that because I want to use that exact thing in the future. However, I also think it's fair that if your partner wants a baby and you don't want depression, we're not talking about the same thing. Because you haven't told me whether or not you want a baby. You've told me whether or not you want depression. And those two things aren't the same. That could be sorted separately. I would want that to be sort of the point of exploration here, to kind of go, tell me more about that. And what if, hypothetically, you know, magic wand, boom, you are immune to depression. You could not experience the mental health that you experience. It's now impossible. Would you want another kid? And if the answer was yes, then now we're talking about, okay, what we need to do is put in good supports around your mental health and support you through the process of another kid to make sure that that doesn't happen. Postnatal depression can happen to fathers. Partly, again, particularly for the first child of relationship, which this one technically isn't, but often the having of a child changes the relationship completely between two people. And often dads just haven't really thought about the fact that that's going to happen. You know, I'll often joke with people that are sort of like, husbands care about wives, but wives care about kids. And there's sort of like, there really isn't a loop back. Very often that is the experience of husbands, is essentially, I didn't marry my kids, I married my wife, but she seems to only care about the kids. And it's like, this is just an entire relationship change that a lot of people don't consider. And absolutely postnatal depression, when things just, they're different, you know, not least for the fact that, again, some of the risk factors of depression around, you know, sleep and energy, you know, social support. For a lot of blokes, their wife is their primary social support. For some, their only social support. Now there's a baby in the mix and she's less available for social support. Sleep being interrupted. Absolutely, you know. So there's that kind of stuff, which actually raises the risk of depression for anybody, but particularly it's actually circumstantial for a lot of these blokes, that they sort of in one foul swoop get added responsibility, reduced social support in terms of their wife's availability to provide it. And again, I haven't talked about kin keeping skills, I took that video down, but essentially a lot of blokes don't have very good skills for gaining and maintaining social support over time. So that's roughly the direction that I would go with something like this. I'm concerned here that, you know, she's talking about whether or not she wants a baby. He's talking about whether or not he wants to get his mental health issues back. And I'd really want to get this bloke to a point where he can have an honest discussion around, do I or do I not want another baby, without consideration of other factors, particularly given that what I'm looking at here is, I'm concerned about the aspect of this being a deal breaker for the relationship. And I would, if it's a deal breaker for the relationship because she wants a baby and he does not want a baby, and that is the basis on which they go, our relationship is no longer compatible, fair enough. But if this has been done for mental health, I just see that creating mental health issues and further compounding mental health issues in a way that's just really unhelpful. So yeah, there's a lot to sort of go with there. I'd also want to just know a little bit more about their relationship before having a child. Before having the second. The stepdaughter's fine. It's before having their first child together. I'd want to know just a little bit more about that. Yeah, to see what the feelings were about the relationship and that sort of thing pre-baby and that kind of stuff. Because his instant reaction regarding wanting to have an abortion sort of says, I wonder whether or not that relationship was particularly secure, and if that added another layer of complexity again. We shall finish up there. Good to see people. This one will go up at some point. I'm going to probably just schedule it to the break. And yeah, I shall catch people at a different time. All right. See us.